Awesome. Okay, if you're here for an overview of, wait for it, Vue.js, you're in the right spot. My name is CJ. I am CJ on Denver Devs. My email is cj@null.computer. That is a real internet address. And on GitHub, I am W3CJ. All of the slides, links, everything I'm showing tonight is at git.io/overvue. So, first, before I even get into it, I just want to say thanks to all of you. If it were not for you, I would not be here. Thanks for voting for me. Thanks for being a part of the Denver developer community. So here's something to get Also, a huge thanks to the organizers and volunteers of Develop Denver. I think we often take it for granted like how awesome this community is. Like the fact that we all get together today and talk about cool stuff. And let's give a round of applause for Develop Denver. Alrighty, so agenda for tonight. Whoa, my GIF's frozen, and it's a GIF with a hard G. There we go. Okay. Wait, oh yeah, it's moving. So first, I'm going to talk about who I am, what I've done, why I am qualified to talk about Vue.js. Then we're going to figure out who all of you are. We're going to then talk about what exactly Vue.js is, where does it fit in the front-end framework, that. And then we're going to do a brief history of Vue.js, and then get into the overview of Vue.js, write some code. We'll go over awesome Vue.js, which is tons of links to sample projects and tutorials, all kinds of stuff to get started with Vue, and then talk about the Vue.js community itself. So first, who am I? My name is CJ. I'm a lead instructor, principal full stack developer at Galvanize. I've been with Galvanize close to 2 years now. If you're not familiar with Galvanize, we are three things. First, we are an education company. So I am a lead instructor in the Web Development Immersive program. We also offer a Data Science Immersive program. We're also an event space. You might have attended a meetup or some kind of event at Galvanize. And we're also a co-working space. So we have open desk seating, you can rent suites, and all three of those things combine to create an entrepreneurship community. Oh yeah, I have some students in the audience, so please raise your hand if I've ever helped you debug some code. Look at that, awesome. Sweet, sweet. That makes me less nervous. Let's keep going, okay. In my career, I've worn many hats. So I started off as a help desk consultant. I've done system administration. I've worked in quality assurance, became a software engineer, and now I'm an instructor. So I really am a full stack developer. I've worked in all the different places in the stack. I have given some meetup talks. You might have seen me there. You might know me from the Node.js meetup and DimmerScript. I gave security best practices with Node.js. So that was all about basically how to hack a Node.js app and how to make it not hackable. I did a talk at DimmerScript about ECMAScript, TC39, and the future of JavaScript. Recently, I did an overview of Unify.js, which is a CSS component library for Vue. And even more recently, I was at the Node.js meetup for the front-end face-off. So we had Kyle Corberly doing Ember, we had Michael Herman doing Angular 4, and Bruce Patton did React Redux, and I wrote everything from scratch, but I did it in VC style. So the links here are out to all the videos and slides and resources for all those talks. Also, why I'm eligible to be talking about Vue.js. So I've worked with a lot of front-end frameworks. So I have a little over 2 years experience with Angular 1X, 3 Angular 1X apps in production. I worked for about a year on React Redux. I have 1 React Redux app in production. And more recently, I've been working with Vue.js 2x, and I have 3 Vue.js apps in production, along with many, many different toy projects to demonstrate the various concepts in a lot of these frameworks. So I've messed around with a lot of these frameworks, and that's kind of where I'm going to be talking from tonight. Cool, so let's find out, who are you? Okay, who writes JavaScript daily? Awesome, turn to a neighbor and give him a high five. Sweet. There you go. So a lot of us do. I'm sure we have other people, maybe UX designers and people like that, also interested in what Vue has to offer. Who has used a front-end JavaScript framework? So this could be React, Angular, Ember, Polymer. Okay, let's survey the room. My React people, raise your hand. All right. My Angular 1X people. Okay. My Angular 4 people. Oh, okay. Just for you. Ember?
Yeah,
all right, Ember, sweet. Any Polymer? There you go. What about Knockout.js? One guy, yes. Sweet. Okay, who here has heard of Vue.js before this talk? Awesome. Who here has never used Vue.js? Beautiful, we're gonna have a great time. We're gonna learn a lot. Who has used Vue.js in a project? Awesome. Hopefully there'll be some little tidbits of information that you can take away as well. And who uses Vue.js daily? Okay, 2 hands. I want to see you at the next Vue.js meetup. I am the organizer. We'll talk about it later. Cool. Let's get into this. So first, what is Vue.js? And let me start a timer. So if you visited their website or seen or heard anything about it, the creator coined this phrase, the progressive JavaScript framework. And what that means is a progressive, incrementally adoptable JavaScript framework for building UI on the web. And so you've probably heard the term progressive used with like progressive web apps, progressive enhancement. The idea being that when you have resources available, you progressively get better or add more to your app. And that's really the philosophy of Vue.js. It originally started out very similar to React as just the Vue layer, but it has core libraries that can be brought in to kind of build it out as a more full-fledged framework, if that is what you want to do with it. And this is kind of the spectrum of all the different things you might need in an application, starting with declarative rendering, which is really awesome in Vue. I'm going to show some examples of how it works, but this is like you're defining your view in according to what your data might hold. But that's not accounting for components or routing or state management or all the other things that we usually care about with front-end frameworks. But Vue.js allows you to bring those things in as you need them. And so Vue.js is a front-end framework, and typically this is the format that front-end frameworks use or how they work nowadays. The idea being that you define your view to be a representation of your data. You might be familiar with handlebar templates or something similar like that. You basically say, if I have some data, this is what the view would look like according to that. And then you have your state, which is your data totally separated from the view. And then various frameworks implement some sort of render cycle where when the state updates or the data updates, the view will re-render. So that's what we're working with Vue.js. This is how React works, this is how Angular works, how Ember works. Of course, the implementation details are much different, but this is what we're talking about when we talk about a front-end framework. So I'm going to take the 3 bullet points from Vue.js's website and sell the framework to you. Okay, so Vue.js is approachable. Already know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Read the guide and start building things in no time. The thing about this, though, is for a lot of other frameworks, you do have to learn special syntax or a different language. But with Vue.js, you can just use what you already know. It is also versatile, so it has a simple, minimal core with an incrementally adoptable stack that can handle apps of any scale. So this is the progressive thing that I was talking about a moment ago. And lastly, it is performant. It's only 20 KB when it's minified in gzipped. It has a blazing fast virtual DOM implementation, and because of this, you hardly ever have to actually do any optimization of your own. It just works and it's fast. So that is Vue. Let's talk about the history of Vue. So where did it come from? It was created by Evan You in 2013 while he was working at Google. So I have a quote from an interview that he was in. My job at Google involved a lot of prototyping in the browser. We had this idea and we wanted to get something tangible as fast as possible. Some of the projects used Angular at the time, and for me, Angular offered something cool, which is data binding, and a data-driven way of dealing with a DOM. So you don't have to touch the DOM yourself. It also brought in all these extra concepts that forced you to structure the code the way it wanted you to. It just felt too heavy for the use case that I had at the time. And then this is a little later in the article, and this really sums up what Vue.js is, and when you see the code, you're gonna very much think this. So I figured, what if I could just extract the part that I really liked about Angular and build something really lightweight without all the extra concepts involved, introducing Vue.js. And so you might have also heard as Vue.js kind of like this middle ground between Angular and React. And it really is, and you'll see that when we start to see some code samples. Some notable events in the history of Vue.js. It was first released on GitHub in February of 2014. OverVue actually prepared to release it. He posted on Hacker News, he posted on r/JavaScript, and it kind of blew up overnight. People were like, the syntax looks cool, this looks fun, I want to use this. And it started to pick up traction. It made it to the front page of Hacker News and the front page of Reddit the first day that he released it. In April of 2015, there was a tweet from Taylor Otwell. So if you're not familiar with Taylor Otwell, he's the creator of Laravel, a PHP web framework. But he did this tweet. Wait, that's not it. This is it. Current React learning status, overwhelmed. Learning Vue.js because it looks easy and has a pretty website. But this one tweet, like all the people involved with Laravel just like hopped on the Vue.js bandwagon, and it very much started to pick up traction. I also linked to this article, so OverVue, before this project, this Vue.js, like he had never really done anything open source, so this talks about how he launched the project and really everything that went into like successfully releasing an open source project. More recently, in September of 2016, Vue.js 2.0 was released. A really big thing that introduced was its own virtual DOM implementation. So before that, not quite sure what it was using, but now it has its own virtual DOM. And if you look at some benchmarks, when you compare it against React, it typically comes in a little bit faster than React. And I don't have those linked. You can find it. And most recently, there was, in June of 2017, VueConf. So this was held in Poland, but this is really telling you that the framework is getting big enough, it's getting popular enough that there's actual conference that people would fly to and talk about Vue at. Vue.js today, so if we look at it on GitHub, it has 63,000 stars. I think React, let's just pull it up, has 70,000? Not that. I can do this. There we go. Yeah, so it's got like 73,000. Angular has less than that. I'm not going to Google it. But check out the GitHub star history. So this is the history of stars on the Vue.js repo. And so it was released in 2014. I realize it's really pixelated, but we're here today, and it has just gradually increased in popularity. If you go to these slides, this tool is pretty sweet. It's called Star History. You can actually overlay other projects on it, so let's just do that real quick. So if we overlay Facebook React on top of that, maybe, let's let that churn for a little bit. And let's also check it out on NPM. So it has over 26,000 downloads in the last day, 156,000 downloads in the last week, 698,000 downloads in the last month, healthy number of issues open on GitHub, and healthy number of pull requests open. So it's an active project. You can see it is an open source project. So a lot of these other frameworks are backed by a company or something like that, but this is purely an open source project with sponsorship from other companies that actually use it. But it's not backed by a company, it really is just open source and kind of owned by the community. Yeah, so this orange line is the React line, and obviously it is more popular, but Vue.js is very much on par. This is my break timer. Can everyone reach into the sky, take a quick stretch? So, overall, Vue.js, it's gaining popularity. It's a good thing. People are using it. It's not just some trend. And that's kind of what I want to show by pulling up those stats. And a fun little thing, so here's the version timeline. All Vue.js major and minor releases are named after an anime or a manga. And they're actually in alphabetical order. The most recent one was version 2.4 in July. It's Kill la Kill. But that's a cool little tidbit, so if you like anime, use Vue. Alright, so now I'm actually going to show some Vue, show how it works, write some code. It's going to be a good time. I'm going to show how to get started. So with a lot of front-end frameworks, there's a lot of concepts introduced. So build tools and transpilers and all these other things. But with Vue.js, you can actually get started without those. So I'm going to show how to build an app without it and really just show how approachable it is. I'll then show the CLI. So Vue.js has a CLI tool that allows you to scaffold projects. So I'll scaffold a project. It has lots of built-in directives. So directives are a way to teach HTML new tricks. And I'll show some of the built-in ones. And it also is a component library. So it allows you to build component hierarchies for your app, just like you would with any other modern framework. If we have time, I'll get to routing and reactivity and state management. But let's see where we get. And if at any time you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll see if I can answer it. Cool. Getting started. I'm going to take a drink of water. Okay. That's it. That's all you need. This is literally all the code required to create a simple Vue.js app. So here we have just a constructor creating a Vue app. We tell it what element we want it to be on. We tell it the data associated with our app, and then our Vue just uses handlebars to render it out. Well, that's literally all you need. So what I'm going to do right now is just set up a simple project locally with an HTML file and show you how Vue works. So I'm just going to make a directory called Getting Started. Really, it's extremely pixelated. It's a shame. Okay, I'm going to create a file, index.html, and we'll edit it inside of Atom. How's that? Cool. So as you can see, this is just a plain old HTML document. But let's bring Vue in. So you can bring Vue in from a CDN. So to the docs. Now, the documentation or the website is one of the things I love about Vue.js. It is extremely easy to get started. They explain everything really well. There's tons of examples, and it's a really easy to use website. So we can go into getting started. This will talk about the different concepts of Vue. But if you go to installation, it shows you a few different ways to install it. I'm going to use it from Unpackage. So if you're not familiar with Unpackage, they essentially create CDN links for any package on NPM. So in the URL, you just throw the name of an NPM package and the version you want, and it will give you back that JavaScript file. Hopefully. Oh, not that. Yeah. So I'm going to bring Vue.js into this HTML right about there. And if you do just version 2, it'll get the latest minor version and pull that in automatically. Cool. So we brought Vue.js in, and now we just write a Vue app. So I'm just going to have a script tag right here. I'm just going to say const app equals new Vue. We're going to pass in an object. We're going to tell it what element should be the Vue. In this case, it's going to be hash app or ID app. And below that, we'll specify some data. So if you're familiar with model view controller or model view view model, Vue actually implements model view view model. So the idea being, if anytime you update something on the model or the data, the Vue will automatically update. So right here, I'm just going to give it a message property. It's going to say, hello, develop Denver. Cool. So this is my Vue app. Now I actually want to show it on the page. So right above here, I'm just going to add a tag. I'm going to give it an ID of app. So those two things link up. And right inside of there, I'm just going to say, please show the message. And I'll throw that inside of H2. Not that. Okay, so this is our Vue.js app. We have a Vue. We tell it that we want to render the message from the data. We've created a Vue app here, and we're setting the message property on the data. And just like that, I have a Vue.js app. So I'm going to use Light Server. It's an auto-refreshing server. And there we go. Hello, Develop Denver. I want to take a pause and just admire how simple this is. No build tools, no really anything else required to simply get started with Vue.js. Now, of course, if you're building a production level app, you want to do that kind of thing, but I usually gauge things on how easy it is for a beginner to get started, and this is extremely easy for a beginner to get started. Cool. I'll take a second to kind of show you the docs because they're pretty awesome. So every single example that is shown on the docs is actually stored as a global variable on the page. You might think, that's crazy, but what it allows you to do is actually open up the DevTools and play around with these examples. So right here on the Vue.js docs, we have this simple app, and we see that it's stored inside this app variable. So right here in my DevTools, I can simply just say app.message equals hello, develop Denver. And I'm actually modifying the underlying variable on the Vue.js documentation. And what I just did there, by updating this variable, you're actually seeing a reactive UI in place. So the idea being, when I update the message property, the view will automatically render. So I'm not going to go through all these examples, but I just want to show how easy it is to get started, and then every single one of these examples has some global variable that you can play around with in the DevTools. So that's a fun time. All right. All right, any questions about the history of Vue, getting started with Vue, before I move on to using the CLI tool to scaffold an app? All right, let's do it. So just like every other modern front-end framework, it has a CLI tool that allows you to scaffold out your app. This is installed globally from NPM. NPM install -g Vue CLI. And then to create a new project, you do Vue init, and then the template that you want to use. So they have several templates available. Webpack is the one I prefer. And then you specify the name of your project. That will create a folder, scaffold out all the Vue stuff that you need. You can install dependencies, and then run an hot reloading, auto-refreshing dev server, which is pretty sweet. We can see some of the other templates that are available. So there's Simple, which is a basic Vue app, basic HTML file. Webpack Simple, which doesn't include a lot of the extra loaders that are included in the full Webpack one. Browserify Simple, very similar. Webpack, the full-featured one, including testing and CSS extraction and all the other things you would possibly need in a production-level app. They also have a progressive web app template and then a Browserify template. So whatever you prefer to use, you can probably find a template for that. Also, if you create a custom template, you can use the CLI tool. You just specify a GitHub username and repo name, and that will use that template to scaffold out a new project. So let us do that and test the internet. Okay, so I'm going to do Vue init webpack, and this is going to be hello develop. Yeah, cool. And so this will create a folder called hello develop Denver, and it's going to ask me some questions. So first, what is my project name? That's okay with me. A description here. The author. You can choose between runtime only, which is a little bit smaller, and runtime plus compiler. Choose runtime plus compiler because whenever you deploy your code, you're going to build it for production anyway, so we'll actually use the runtime only. Out of the box, it will set up a router for you, so I'm just going to let it do that. It'll set up linting for you and ask you what you want to use. I prefer Airbnb. You can set up unit tests. I'm not going to do that for now because it takes a while to install. And you can also set up end-to-end tests with Nightwatch. It sounds like my voice is very crackly, is it not? Yes, it is.
You have some batteries in your pack, it's probably low battery.
Let's check it. It is, good call. I do have batteries though, but yeah.
Okay.
Turn to somebody you do not know and introduce yourself. app, and you'll notice that it created this hello develop Denver folder just right here. So we can go into that folder and then do an npm install. That will install all of our dependencies. While that's happening, let's check out Vue.js directives. So if you're familiar with Angular, a lot of these are going to seem very similar. And for me, when I was learning Vue, that was a good thing. It felt like it took the good things about Angular and allowed you to use those, and then actually like created a whole new underlying implementation that's much better than how Angular actually works. In modern front-end apps, you want to do things like conditional rendering. So if something is true, show this element. If it's not true, hide the element. You want to do things like loops. So iterate over an array of data and show all of the data as line items or something like that. You want to handle user input. So Vue offers v-on events. So v-on click, v-on hover, v-on mouse over. All of those are available to you, and you can specify functions that will get called. You can also bind inputs to vModel. This will bind your input to the data. And you can also specify specific classes that can be bound based on expressions, and similarly with styles. So our Vue.js app is done rendering, installing dependencies, and we can do npm run dev, and this will start that auto-reloading, hot reloading dev server. And something's happening. Oh, not that. Say, please. Kill the light server. Okay. Yes, so after you've generated your Vue app, you have a basic Vue.js app running on port 8080. It has a basic routing setup, and right now I think it has 2 components. So let's look at the file structure that actually got generated. So if we look over here, it has created a lot of stuff. So this comes out of the box with Babel configuration, and Webpack will transpile your ES Next code. It comes with an NES-lint file that you can customize. It comes with post-CSS rules that you can customize. And it comes with all sorts of build scripts for building for production, and Webpack configurations for your local dev server, all the things you might need. The code that you will be writing will be in this source folder. And it all starts with main.js. So in main.js, we bring Vue in from the node module. And in here, we're actually importing our main component. So I'm going to talk about components in a second, but we bring that in, we bring in the router, and then we create a new Vue app, very similar to how we did it earlier, and we specify the app element. So this basic index.html file that it generates is very, very basic. It just has a div, but whenever you build it for production, everything else that is required for your app will automatically get injected. So that's our app. I'm going to go into app.vue and start playing around with some of these directives, and then we'll take a step back and really explain what is happening in this app.vue component. So right now it has this router view. I'm just going to get rid of that. It has this image, just going to get rid of that. Let's just throw an h1 with a message. And on components, you specify data as a function, because the idea is for every instance of that component, it needs to return a new object. So instead of just being an object, it's a function that returns an object. My linter is telling me I need to do lots of stuff like that. And we're going to specify a message that is hello. And I need a trailing comma. There we go. So our basic app, it's saying hello. So let's look at some of these directives. Yeah, so let's look at these conditional rendering directives. So something like v-if. So right here in my view, let's say I have a div, and I can say right here v-if, and inside the double quotes, I can specify a Vue.js expression. So this expression has access to all of the variables on data, and I can specify anything in there. So right here, I'm going to say v-if is awesome. Is awesome. Yes. Okay. When you go back to the browser, I'm going to show something that is awesome about Vue, the error messages. So Vue has really easy to read error messages, and they tell you exactly what you need to fix. So right here, this first one, property or method is awesome, is not defined on the instance. This is my break timer again. It's been 15 minutes. Can you believe it? Reach into the sky. Cool. So these error messages are extremely helpful. So is awesome is not defined on the instance, but referenced during the render. So our render function is trying to use this is awesome variable, but it's not defined on the instance. Make sure to declare reactive data properties in the data option. So I will do just that. So down here, I'm going to say is awesome is true. Now it says is awesome. Cool. So this actually is hot reloading and auto refreshing, so the errors stick around, but if I do a hard refresh, those errors go away. So vif is a thing. There's also velse. That can come right after a vif, and this thing will be rendered if that's not true. Not awesome. And so if we set is awesome to false, not that, false, it will say not awesome. And so the idea is you can use this conditional rendering to specify what should be showed in the DOM and what shouldn't. One thing to note is vif and velse will actually remove those elements from the DOM if it's not true. So yeah, it literally removes those elements. If you're using vhide and vshowed, it just sets display none. So depending on the app that you're developing and the behavior that you want, you might choose either, depending on what's going on. Okay, let's take a look at v4, one of my favorites. Use it all the time. So right here, I'm just going to do, and actually let's change it back to true because we are awesome. Cool. And right inside of here, I'm just going to have, before I do any of that, let's get some data. So I'm going to make an API request out to the Jiffy API. And we're going to get some cats. Cool, so that works. So, just real quick, I'm going to, just to get this working, actually no, we'll wait. We'll do the API request in a second. So right here, I'm just going to say, let's say cats. And this is an array of cat names. Give me a cat name.
Tabby.
Tabby, is that what I heard? One more.
Snuffles.
Snuffles? Snuffles, okay. Cool. Cool. So we have an array of cats. Now we're going to use a v4 that iterates over that and shows it in the view. So just right here, I'm going to add an unordered list, and then a list item. And right on the list item, this is the thing that I want to repeat. So for every item in that array, I want a new list item with the cat name. So right here, I'm going to see v4 equals cat in cats. And then right inside of here, I can throw cat. And just like that, you get all the cats. Right? So the idea here is cats is a reactive property on our data that is an array. And we're saying for every item inside of that, give it the name cat and then render that right here inside the list item. So super powerful. You'll use this all the time. Yes. Handling user input. So let's make a simple little form that lets us add a cat to the list. And I realize all these styles are really throwing me off. Let's not do that. Okay, sure. So right about here, I'm going to create a form. I'm going to create an input. Type of text, the name is name, and the ID is name. And above that, we'll do a label, which is for name, cat, name. And then I'll have a simple little button that we can click to add the cat. So add cat. Cool. We'll give it a type of submit, so this will submit the form. Now the other directive that I talked about a little bit earlier is wait, my Angular brain kicked in. V-model, I almost said ng model. Okay, so on the input, basically we want to say, when we're typing in this input, we want to bind it to one of our reactive data properties. So right here, I'm going to say v-model, and I'm going to set that equal to cat name. And so now, on our data, we can specify cat name, and this will be updated under the hood as we type into that input box. So just to show how that works, I'm going to just throw right there cat name so we can see it working. So I start typing and it starts showing up. Awesome. What I want to do is when I click this, I want to take the value that's in here and add it to the list. So let's do that. These vOn directives allows you to specify specific events. So I'm actually going to use a vOn on the form, do vOn, and I'm going to say submit. And when we submit this form, we're going to call a function that's in our component. So here I'm going to say add cat. Now I have to define that function. So on a Vue component, you can specify methods. This is simply an object with functions inside of it, and those functions can be called inside the Vue. So right here, I'm going to say add cat, and this function is simply going to take the cat name and push it into the cats array. So we're going to say this.cats.push this.catName. And so because the data is reactive, the moment we push it into this array, it's going to pop up in the Vue. The other thing we'll do is because we're nice UX citizens, we will clear the form. So by simply setting cat name to an empty string, that clears the form out. So there's one last thing we got to do, but let's see it happen. Do a hard refresh. So give me another cat name.
Snowball.
Awesome. Snowball. Like that. Okay. We'll add the cat watch. It'll show up for a second, and then the page refreshes. So the page refreshes because we're not preventing the default action. So like when we submit the form, it's actually like making a GET request against itself. So to fix that, you literally just have to say .default. And built into Vue, it knows it will now prevent the default action. So now when we add a cat, snowball, go. It adds it, and the page doesn't refresh. Pretty awesome, yeah. Sweet. I'm not going to demo class and style binding, but it's just very similar to a lot of other frameworks. The idea being you can add some class to an element if certain expressions are true or false, and you can specify various style properties if certain expressions are true or false. All right. Cool thing to note is there are shorthands. So I don't have any vbinds right now. We'll probably add some later, but you can simply leave off vbind and just have a colon, and your data will be bound to that element. And for events, you can actually replace vOn with just an @. And the idea is you're using these things often, so it's a nice little shorthand where you can just do that. Works in exactly the same way, but it's a little more readable, less verbose. Cool. Any questions about the directives in Vue before we talk about components? Wonderful. All right, so like every other modern UI, I keep saying that, I'm gonna stop saying that. You have an app, you want to break it up into components. So we have like a nav bar, and we have the main section and the sidebar. And when you're structuring this app, it's a component hierarchy. So you have child components of parent components, and they all descend from like the app level. Vue allows you to do this, and allows you to do it beautifully. So our code might look like this. So we have our div app. We have our app nav, which is a component that we created up at the top. We have our app view, which is a component we created. We have our app sidebar, which we also created, and app content. But by simply structuring out these components, each one of those components itself has a view and some data and some methods that will specify the functionality for each one of those components. Now, if you're using Vue without any build tools, you can specify components like this. So you say view.component, you give it the name of the component, and then a template string. So the template string is just some HTML, and inside of that you can actually have handlebars or bindings to the data. And then to use that component, you simply just specify the name of the component. Now in this case, this is a global component registration, meaning that once you do this, you can use this component throughout your application. I'm going to show how we actually register components only where they're needed, so they're not like global variables. But if you're just getting started with Vue, this is how you could create components. One of the other things you want to do with components, though, is pass data into them, right? So you're specifying elements, but you have data in a parent that you need to get down to those components. So for that, you need props. So we can specify the same component in a very similar way, but now we just tell it what props do we have. So in this case, you specify an array of all the props or the attributes that this element will have, and you give it a name, and then we can actually use that prop inside of the template. So actually, I didn't update my slide. This literally should just say title. Because in our data, we have an array of talks. Each one is just a string. And when we render out each of these components, we want to pass down that string so that that component shows the title of the talk. So that might look like this. So we have some unordered list, and then we specify our new component that we created, and then we use our v-for, which will work on any custom component as well. And we say for every talk in the talks array, please create this talk item component. And here we use our binding. So typically you would see v-bind:talk. So what this says is, I want you to bind the talk prop, which was specified in the component, to be this value, which is coming from the v-for. So we're literally passing down the talk to that subcomponent so that it can render that value. Cool. But what we were actually working in with the Vue-generated app was a single file component. And what's really cool about a single file component is you can't see that at all. But basically the file has a template up at the top. It has your script in the middle, which is defining your actual component, and then your styles down at the bottom. But you'll notice on this, we can specify any preprocessor for any one of these sections. So up at the top, it's using Jade as the templating language. The script, technically, you could use TypeScript, you could use JSX. You simply just say, this is the language that we're using here. And then for the styles, you could use Stylus or Less or Sass. And the Webpack build pipeline will automatically transpile that into the thing that it needs to be. By default, we can just use plain old HTML, plain old JavaScript, and plain old CSS. But it has the power to use those different preloaders. And so when you define a single file component, it's actually imported as an ES 2015 module. So it takes the template, it takes the component definition, all the styles, and compiles it into basically a render function, which is a collection of the template, the logic, and the style. And like I said earlier, you can use what you know, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But if you do want to use something else, you simply just make sure you have that Webpack loader, and you can use that in your components. So seamlessly use Babel, Sass, Less, or even Hug in the same file. Hot reloading out of the box. It also provides scoped CSS. So just to see an example of that, kind of zoom out here. This is what we were working in. We had our template, which represents the app. We had our component, which specified data and methods, and then our styles down below. But if we throw scoped on this style right here, what that says is these styles will not leak out to other components. They'll specifically only apply to this component, which is pretty handy. Cool. Vue lifecycle hooks. So this is where I will call an API. So every component has various lifecycle methods that will be called when various things happen. So from the Vue docs, we can see what all of those look like. Your Vue.js application is created, and the before create function gets called. You can tap into that on your app and specify something that should happen before the app is created. There's also a created event. So once the app has been created, you can run some code. There's a before mount. So before the app is mounted, before a component is mounted, you can write some code that does something inside of there. There's also the mounted event, before update, before destroy. Any one of these you can tap into to specify your own code that should run. So for my case, I want to tap into the mounted event. So when a component gets mounted, let's make an API request. So I will do just that. So your component lifecycle methods just go at the root level of the component. So right here, I'm just going to say mounted. And for now, I'll just log it out. We'll say mounted. We should see that in the console. Yeah, there it is. So the moment this app component is mounted, that function gets run. So what I want to do is make an API request right here. So I'm just going to use fetch, which is built into all modern browsers. We're going to request these GIFs, and then we're going to turn them into JSON. And then we're going to put them on the model. Right now, I'll just log them out so we can see what property we really want. A linter wants that. Cool. So now when the component mounts, we make the API request, and what just happened?
JSON invoked.
Gotta invoke the JSON. Cool. So now we have some data. So this is coming back from the Jiffy API. And we want to show some GIFs on the page. So inside there, we can look inside of images that has some properties. Let's do it. So on our data model, we're now going to say Jiffys. This is going to be an array of Jiffys. And right here, we're just going to have we'll do a div, and inside of it we'll have an image, but on the div we're going to repeat over GIF in Jiffies. Is anybody cringing when I use a hard G on GIF? Cool. I'm glad, yeah. Okay, so right here, my break time, we're running low on time. Okay, I'm reaching to the sky. Awesome. So let's show some GIFs. So right here on the source, I'm going to add this colon, which binds that attribute to what I'm about to pass to it. So right here, I'm going to say gif.images.fixedheightsmall.url. Yeah. So this will bind to the Jiffies array. And then now, right inside of here, I need to actually set this to be the data I got back from the API. So right there, I'm just going to say this.jiffies equals result.data. Cool. Just like that, we get GIFs on the page. So I definitely am running short on time. Where am I? Who's in charge? Nobody's in charge. 5 minutes? 10 minutes? Okay, cool. Vue.js router. So I've shown kind of like the basic concepts of building components, but in every modern application you have multiple pages, right? You have different routes for different things. So let's talk about Vue router. So Vue router is not built into the core library, but it is maintained by the core team. But if you want to use it, you have to bring it in separately. Just like the Vue.js docs, these docs are fantastic. I haven't found a single thing that I wanted to do that I couldn't find in the docs. But because we generated our app with routing built in, it's already set up. So let's take a look at how that works. So to install the router, if you were doing this from scratch, you would npm install Vue router. In the component itself, you import in Vue router and then tell Vue to use that router. On your main component, you pass in your router, which has all of your route definitions. And then in your Vue, if you want to show it, you use the router Vue component provided by Vue router. But let's take a look at what they created for us. So in here, we have our router folder, and we can look at index.js. And we'll see right now it has one very simple route. It says when the path is / load the hello component. So in app.vue, I actually ripped that out a second ago. So this router view, when I uncomment this, what happens is the app will load up and the hello component will get loaded because we're on the /view. So now, right below all my Jiffies, there it is. So this is that hello component, but it's being brought in from the route itself. So I'm going to do this real quick. So inside of components, I'm just going to create a new component. And I'm going to move all of this code that I created into that so we can create a separate route. So inside components, let's call this hello develop Denver.vue. I have a fancy little snippet that allows me to create a Vue.js template. So up top, we have our template. So I'm going to go ahead and grab all of this HTML. We're going to throw it into the template. So a template needs one root level element. So I can't just directly paste it in. I'll throw in like a section and then throw the HTML inside of that. I need to move over basically everything. I'm just gonna do this. We're gonna take this out of here, pull it into this component, and then just make this a very dumb component. Cool. Now in this component that we just created, I'm going to give it a name. So instead of app, we'll call this hello developer. And now I can actually use this component. So over in our router definitions, I'm going to bring in the component and then specify a route that whenever the URL is that, we will load that specific component. So right here, I'm going to import that from this. So built into the Webpack config, it tells it that what our file path is, so we don't have to actually use a relative file path. Just by using that @ sign, it knows to look in the source directory, which is pretty cool. All right, and so now we can define a new route. So a route has a path. So this path is just going to be develop. And the name is going to be hello develop Denver. And the component is going to be that specific component. And so what this says is, when the URL is /develop, please load this component into this router view right there. So by default, what's happening?
I think your file name is a little different.
Yeah.
Oh, true, yeah, okay, let's see. Components.
Put the E's in
You
Denver.
spelled out Denver.
I spelled out Denver. Psh. No, Denver, Denver. Cool, so notice by default, the hello route will load, but now we want to link over to the other route that we just defined. So built into Vue Router is this router link, and what it allows us to do is basically create an anchor tag that links to a specific route. So in my hello component, down here at the bottom, I'm going to add a link out to my develop Denver component or route. So the name of the route is hello develop Denver, I think, isn't it? Yes, so the name should match there. In our case, we haven't specified any params for the route, but you can specify route parameters very similar to any routing you've ever done before. But in our case, we have no params. So this just says this specific anchor tag is going to link to that route. So right there, I'm just going to say hello Denver. And now on this component, I have this nice little link here, and when I click it, it goes to that specific route. You'll notice the URL updated, and when we're looking at, it's really hard to see, but you definitely can't see that. By using this router link component, it automatically adds an href to this element. Actually, we can look at the DevTools to see what actually gets created. So it's an anchor tag that adds that href. You could do that manually, but by using router link, you just specify the name of the route and it knows what URL to add in. Wonderful. Cool. What time should I end? 8 minutes, cool. We'll talk about reactivity and then we'll do some shoutouts. So, I've mentioned this a few times, but really, how is this working under the hood? Because every framework does it differently. Like, how is it automatically updating the view when the data changes? So, Vue.js specifically uses ES5 getters and setters. So, in ES5, it's possible to create basically a getter and setter on properties on an object. So you can, that function will be called every time a property is set, or every time a property is updated, or every time a property is retrieved. And so by simply tapping into those getters and setters, Vue.js knows when to change the view. So if you're familiar with Angular 1, it uses the digest loop, which is actually not very performant, and it's basically checking all the time to see if things change. But this only is alerted when things are actually changed. So let's say a setter for a specific property on the data is called. A watcher will see that that property was changed. It will then tell the view, hey, we need to re-render. What this isn't showing is it also kind of queues up those renders. So if there are multiple things happening at the same time, the view won't automatically update. It'll kind of wait until all of the updates have happened to the model, and then it will re-render based on those new values. But this is really great because it is reactive. Like, there's no like polling to see if things change. Literally, it knows exactly when specific properties change, so it knows when to update the view. Cool. One limitation of this, though, is it cannot detect property addition. So if you're trying to add a property to something on your data, so let's say right in here, you had something like a user, and it just starts off as an empty object. If you wrote some code later that added a first name property, Vue wouldn't know that you added that property. So specifically, if you want to dynamically add properties, you have to use this Vue set if you're doing it globally, or this $sign set. And basically, that lets Vue know, hey, I just created this property dynamically. Please add the watcher so I know when that thing changes. Awesome. Just a quick talk about state management. So with Vue.js, I personally love the built-in state management. It works wonderfully, and you can actually structure it in a similar way to kind of like the top-down, where all of your state is at the top and it's just simply being passed by props. But it takes advantage of the reactivity of those models. So you literally could just have a plain old JavaScript object. This could be just a simple module that exports an object, and then your components could simply import that object, and now they're both just listening on that object. So if you push values into arrays, if you change properties, both of these components will be alerted, and that's just out of the box built in. Now, of course, if you really like React Redux, you probably like the Flux pattern. Oh, I spoke too soon. But there is Vuex, which is created specifically for Vue.js and has a very similar style to Redux. So if you're familiar with that, you can use Vuex. But the one thing that changes is that Vuex knows about reactivity. This is my long break timer, and I'm basically done, but let's all reach into the sky. So because Vuex knows about reactivity, like it knows when certain things change, it takes advantage of that fact. And really actually allows you to mutate state. So a lot of these other implementations are all about not mutating state and just having a log of every action. But because of the reactivity built into Vuex, we can still have a log of every action and mutate state. So we get the best of both worlds. Wonderful. Lastly, awesome Vue.js. So this is just a link to tons and tons of Vue.js resources. So job postings, community postings, websites that talk about them, plugins for Vue.js, component libraries, utilities, all kinds of really cool stuff. Check that out. Oh yeah, and I have a few starter projects. So Basic Vue Starter is a project that I made where it uses no Webpack, no Babel, nothing like that. And it actually does use Vue component files. So I'm using HTTP Vue Loader, which allows you to specify your components just like you would when you're using a transpiler or something like that. But all of this runs natively in the browser without any sort of transpiler. So you can see, like, this is the code from this repo running live, like no transpiling or anything like that. And you can tell I like catches. But it has routing, all that built in. And then I also have one that uses Vuetify. So Vuetify is a material component library. A few links to some of the talks I've given at my Vue.js meetup. And, okay, I'm almost done, really am. So Vue.js community, I am the organizer at the Denver Vue.js meetup. So we are having a meetup on the 25th. I'm looking for lightning talk speakers, full talk speakers if you're interested. It's totally okay if you're a beginner. You can talk about how you learned Vue.js or something like that. So please check it out. We're on meetup.com. There's an official Vue forum where you can ask questions, get answers from the creator of Vue himself. There's a Discord chat, and there's also like a show and tell subforum, very similar to Awesome Vue, in that people show projects and share repos and stuff like that. Also, support Evan You. So Evan You is the creator of Vue.js, and he lives solely off of Patreon contributions. So he manages the Vue.js library, he manages Vue Router, Vuex, Vue Loader, contributes to all of these things, but he's basically doing it just for donations. So if you use Vue.js and you get some use out of it, throw him some money, because he's awesome. Okay, lastly, shout-outs. Develop Denver, let's give it up. This has been amazing. Incredibly honored to be up here and to be with you all, and yeah, this is awesome. Also, to the venue, like, I'm giving a tech talk and there's abstract art on the walls. Like, this is fantastic. Like, this is great. Also to Cast. So, this talk would not have been possible without my Vue nail. So if you can see that. So Cass painted my nail, and I could not have coded all of this without her help. So if you see her, this is her face, please shower her with praise, gratitude, and job offers. She's right there, yes. Also, Galvanize is hiring. So we are hiring lead instructors. You can go to gjobs.link/lead instructor. And we're looking for people that are interested in being educators. That said, you can be a senior dev and learn to teach people. It's an acquirable skill, which leads into Kim. So Kim is going to be speaking next, right here on this very stage, on how to be a kick-ass teacher. So if you want to learn teaching techniques and how to get to your students and the people that you're teaching, stick around for that. Also, come say hi. I have tons of Vue stickers. I also have this custom Denver Vue sticker that I created. So come say hello. Tell me one thing you liked about my talk, one thing I can improve on, and you get a sticker. And thank you so much.